गुड मॉर्निंग गाइस। आज हम करेंगे एस 240। एस 240 है द ऑडिटर्स रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज रिलेटिंग टू फ्रॉड इन एन ऑडिट ऑफ फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट। द ऑडिटर्स रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी रिलेटिंग टू फ्रॉड in an audit of financial statement. Meaning and nature of fraud. What is fraud? Fraud is intentional act involving use of deception to obtain an unjust or illegal advantage. Intentional act involving use of deception to obtain an unjust or illegal advantage. Auditor is concerned with fraud that causes material misstatement. Auditor is concerned with fraud that causes material misstatement. Misstatement may result from fraudulent financial reporting and misappropriation of assets. Fraudulent financial reporting के अंदर क्या सब आता है? रिकॉर्डिंग फिक्टिशियस जर्नल एंट्रीज टू मैनिपुलेट ऑपरेटिंग रिजल्ट्स, inappropriate assumption, changing judgment to estimate account balances, omitting, advancing or delaying recognition of event and transactions occurred during the year, concealing facts that affect the amount recorded in financial statement, engaging in complex transactions that are structured to misrepresent the financial position or financial performance, altering record relating to significant transaction. Misappropriation of assets means the embezzling receipt, stealing physical assets, causing an entity to pay for goods and services not received, using entity assets for personal use. फिर आता है फ्रॉड रिस्क फैक्टर. फर्स्ट है फ्रॉड रिस्क फैक्टर इंसेंटिव और प्रेशर टू कमिट फ्रॉड. दूसरा परसीव्ड अपॉर्चुनिटी टू डू सो, rationalization to do so. First, incentive or pressure to commit fraud arises when management is under pressure to achieve an unrealistic target. Perceived opportunity to do so arises when an individual believes that internal control can be overridden. Rationalization to do so arises when an individual possesses an attitude or character that allow them knowingly and intentionally to commit a dishonest act. नेक्स्ट आता है रिस्क एसोसिएट फॉर नॉन डिटेक्शन ऑफ मटेरियल मिस स्टेटमेंट. Risk associated for non-detection of material misstatement. Due to inherent limitation, there is always an unavoidable risk of material misstatement in financial statement due to fraud. Risk of not detecting a material misstatement resulting from fraud is higher than the risk of not detecting one resulting from error. Risk of material misstatement due to management fraud is higher than due to employee fraud. Condition or event which increases risk of fraud or error. First, discrepancies in accounting record. Second, conflicting or missing evidences. Third, unusual relationship between auditor and management. And four others factors. First क्या है? Discrepancies in accounting records arises due to improper recording, unauthorized transaction, last minutes adjustment. Second, conflicting or missing evidences, missing document, altered documents, non-availability of original document, unexplained item, etc. Unusual relationship between auditor and management, undue time pressure, unusual delay in providing information, unwillingness to address weakness in internal control. Other, management not allowing auditor to meet with TCWG, varied accounting policies, frequent changes in accounting estimates. There are two duties. First is management duties and auditor's duties. Management duties, primary responsibility for prevention and detection of fraud rests with management and TCWG. To ensure prevention of fraud, management must have a commitment to create a culture of honesty and ethical behavior. Then auditor's duties. Auditor's duty is to obtain reasonable assurance that financial statements as a whole are free from material misstatement. Maintain an attitude of professional skepticism. Circumstances indicate existence of material misstatement. Consider whether such a misstatement is an indication of fraud if fraud identified. Communicate to management and TCWG, also to regulatory and enforcement authorities if required by law. Auditor unable to complete the engagement. Consider the possibility of withdrawing. If withdraw, discuss with management and TCWG and report to appropriate person. नेक्स्ट है रिस्क असेसमेंट प्रोसीजर एंड रिस्पॉन्स टू असेस रिस्क. रिस्क असेसमेंट प्रोसीजर क्या क्या? ensuring management and other within the entity. Next, inquiry those charged with governance, unusual or unexpected relationship identified, other information, and last evaluation of fraud risk factor. अब एक एक रिस्क असेसमेंट प्रोसीजर को हम लोग समझेंगे. Ensuring management and other within the entity. Auditors shall make inquiry of management regarding assessment of risk of material misstatement due to fraud, process for identifying and responding to the risk of fraud in the entity, including any specific risk of fraud, communication if any to TCWG, and communication if any to employees regarding its view or business practices and ethical behavior. Appropriateness of making inquiry of management. Management is responsible for entity internal control and for preparation of financial statement. It is appropriate for the auditor to make inquiry of management regarding management's own assessment of the risk of fraud and the control in place to prevent and detect it. The nature, extent, and frequency of management assessment of such risk and control may vary from entity to entity. In some entities, management may make detailed assessment on an annual basis or as a part of continuous monitoring. In other entities, management assessment may be less structured and less frequent. The nature, extent, and frequency of management assessment are relevant to the auditor's understanding of entities' control environment. Next, the inquiry those charged with governance. Auditors shall obtain an understanding how the person who charged with governance supervise management process. Auditors shall take TCWG whether they have knowledge of any fraud affecting the entity. Then, an unusual or unexpected relationship identified. The auditor shall evaluate whether unusual or unexpected relationship identified in performing analytical procedure may indicate risk of material misstatement due to fraud. Other information. Auditor shall consider whether other information obtained by the auditor indicate risk of material misstatement due to fraud. Evaluation of fraud risk factor. The auditor shall evaluate whether the information obtained indicate that one or more fraud risk factors are present. However, fraud risk factor may not necessarily indicate the existence of fraud. Then responses to assess risk. First, overall responses. Then responses at assertion level. Responses to risk relating to management override of control. First, overall response क्या है? The auditor shall assign and supervise personnel as per their capabilities. Evaluate whether accounting policies adopted by entity indicate fraudulent financial reporting resulting from management's effort to manage earnings and incorporate surprise element in the selection of nature, timing, and extent of audit procedure. Responses at the assertion level. Auditors will design and perform further audit procedure whose NTE are responsive to the assessed risk of material misstatement due to fraud at the assertion level. Responses to risk related to management override of control. Management is in a unique position to override fraud because of management's ability to manipulate accounting records and prepare fraudulent financial statement by overriding controls. It is a risk of material misstatement due to fraud and thus a significant risk. Auditors shall determine whether the auditor need to perform extra audit procedure. So ऐसे 240 हमारा होता है complete. And thank you so much guys for watching this video.